One of the things that is really necessary that we forget about, I think, sometimes is that kids need to learn basic communication skills. And so I think in what we have outlined, at least in our book, what we think school counselors need to learn is how to teach kids, how to model for kids, how to embrace, how to facilitate among kids basic communication skills. I think that's a hot topic. We try to address that in our book. I think it needs to be addressed all over the place, everywhere, every single day. And that, you know, when you talk about multicultural, making counselors multiculturally competent, making counselors advocates, all of those have circle around basic communication skills, giving kids those skills. And so that's a hot topic, I think.
Yeah. I would add that one of the things that I notice in practice is that kids have so many more means of communication now than they did when I was a kid. And doesn't that sound typical of a middle-aged person saying that? We've said it forever. But the reality is that an awful lot of kids are learning, using trademarks maybe is inappropriate, but they learn how to communicate on Facebook. But they don't know how to take their typed or photographed, uploaded means of connecting with others and translating that into the here and now, into a public way of greeting one another.
Or of being in conflict and avoiding, getting out of conflict, working through conflict. They don't know how to do that.
Sure. And yeah, that really triggers something for me, and I'll just mention it real quickly, is when I'm talking to interns, counselor educator interns, who are working in schools, they talk about kids handling conflict by hitting the do not receive button on their cell phone. Yeah. How do you deal with conflict? You bar them from your Facebook site. Yeah. Well, these things might work in this technological means, but we do believe that people need to learn how. Well,
you still have to go back to the classroom and sit next to them in the room, even though you're not talking to them on Facebook. You know, you still have to be connected with these people.
Or work together on teams or committees or school projects. And yeah.
So a little bit different, perhaps, on the take of hot topics is we don't need to look far for the hot topics. Let's just look at our population and what their needs are.
We ask throughout the text, we ask for group leaders to listen carefully to students about what they need. And in terms of the theme of a group or the topic in a psychoeducational classroom lesson, listen carefully. That's a hot topic. Us saying less of what they need and listening to what they tell us that they want or they need.
And also to listen to what they're not saying and to be listening to the context that the kids are living in, and to be bringing, as advocates perhaps would be the term, bringing some of that into the conversations. We talk a lot about that. We use that metaphor of windows and mirrors, that part of the role of a counselor working with kids is to provide windows for kids to see opportunities that exist outside of their own experience. So to take another perspective, to see the life of how someone else lives or how someone else sees things. We sit in meetings all the time and hear one perspective, one truth. And so we talk a lot about the role of teaching kids to do that and making that happen. And then also providing mirrors so that kids' perspectives are valued. And I think when we talk about diversity issues in society and schools, I think that really gets to the core of it, is that counselors need to be advocates for kids, and they can do that by really teaching kids how to value multiple perspectives and also providing supports, role models for kids who have maybe a different voice. I think that's a hot topic, and that's something that needs to be addressed in schools, and it has to do, I think, with basic communication skills.
Excellent.